Now we have the privilege of hearing from our Circuit Overseer, Brother Nicols. Increase your share in the marking work. Brother Nicols.
Well, it's nice to be with your congregation this evening, and we're looking forward to our special week of activity as we're able to spend our week with the Smith congregation. We got some good news and some bad news. The good news is we got a really, really good week in store for us. And the bad news, well, we'll tell you that Sunday. Now the bad news, this is our last time. But let's talk about that on Sunday. Let's just have a good time this week as we start off. But we're have a nice schedule of activity. We'll make the ministry a big part of our week. Starting tomorrow morning, we'll be meeting here at the Kingdom Hall at 9:30. And we'll share in the ministry on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday mornings at 9:30. And then Sunday we'll have an opportunity after our meeting concludes. On Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, we'll also have a meeting for field service at 1:15 in the afternoon. So by about 1:30, we'll be going back out in the field for as long as your schedule will allow you to remain in the ministry. So those are our schedules for the ministry. We have a nice group of talks that the branch office has provided for us. The one this evening that Brother Jensen mentioned, increasing our share in the marking work. And then on Thursday evening after our congregation book study, we're going to address the topic of youths. Are your goals leading you to success? I think that you'll find that that's an interesting discussion, especially for our young ones. But you know, all of us are kind of young at heart, aren't we? And so we all have a little bit of youth left. And so where are our goals leading us with what youth we have? Is it leading us to success as we can serve Jehovah? On Sunday, our public talk is entitled, Where Can You Find Help, or Where Can You Get Help, rather, in Times of Distress? Where can you get help in times of distress? After our Watchtower study, we're going to pose a question, and we're going to leave it to you to answer the question. But the question is, are you ready? We'll discuss that as our concluding talk on Sunday. Just a couple other appointments that we have. At Saturday afternoon at 1:30, we are going to meet with our regular and auxiliary pioneers. And so at 1:30, we'll invite the auxiliary pioneers to join us, and that will be about a half-hour program for the auxiliary pioneers. How many do we have for the month of August? Auxiliary pioneers. Okay, 1, 2. Okay. Well, we'll look forward to having you brothers join us, and maybe there's some others just got bashful on us. But then we'll meet with the 17 regular pioneers. After that, at about 2 o'clock, we'll meet with our regular pioneers and share with them some encouraging material as well. Friday evening at 7 o'clock, we'll meet with our appointed elders and ministerial servants and care for some matters for the congregation. I think that's pretty much got our schedule. Public talk, same time as you normally have it Sunday morning, and you can invite your Bible students to the talk, Where Can You Get Help in Times of Distress? As we're thinking about increasing our share in the marking work, we'd just like to have you let your minds reflect back to what happened 3 years ago. First week of September, the Gulf Coast of the United States was devastated by a tremendous hurricane. And then that was followed up with a Hurricane Rita, which was followed up by a Hurricane Wilma. And those 3 hurricanes caused extensive damage throughout the southern coast of the United States: Katrina, Rita, and Wilma. Kind of interesting, we're talking about hurricanes, and they just had Tropical Storm Eduardo hit the Galveston area this morning, and got a lot of rain and wind. Generally, after those hurricanes are all done and the storm has passed, almost immediately you have individuals who start to go through the communities, and they're looking for individuals that are stranded, that need help, and they're looking for, individuals that perhaps became victims of the hurricane. As they make their searches, these individuals do something that's kind of interesting. As they exit a building and they search the entire premises, a house or a building, they'll paint a symbol on the building. And what that does is it tells the searchers who are coming along behind them that we've already searched that building, you don't need to go there. They can spend their time looking in other buildings or other dwellings to see if there's survivors or perhaps victims of the hurricane. And by making those marks on the building, they're able to just keep progressively working through the damaged area of the city. Now those marks serve a very good purpose to help to organize and to expedite the help that can be given to survivors. But you know, the Bible says that we're involved in a marking work to some degree. But far different from a marking work that's done after a hurricane, the marking work that we're doing is marking individuals so that they will survive the impending storm of Jehovah's judgment. Turn with me in your Bibles to Ezekiel, the 9th chapter. And let's notice how this marking work is described for us. Ezekiel chapter 9, starting in verse number 2, Ezekiel saw a vision. And in this vision, he saw the city of Jerusalem. And then he saw 6 men with weapons for smashing that were in their hand as they were approaching the city. And along with them was a 7th individual, a man dressed in white linen who had a secretary's inkhorn and a marking instrument. Now as Ezekiel watched this vision, the author of the vision, Jehovah, told this man with the secretary's inkhorn to pass through the midst of the city. And he said, as you pass through the midst of the city, he says, put a mark on the foreheads of individuals, men, women, and children who were sighing and groaning over the detestable things that were being done in the midst of the city that were bringing reproach on Jehovah's name. Now as this account here in Ezekiel chapter 9 continues, as the man with the writer's inkhorn proceeds through the city, as he gets near to completing his task, Jehovah then addresses the 6 men with weapons for smashing. He tells them to follow him through the city. He says, let your eye not feel compassion. Anyone that does not have a mark, man, woman, child, old man, young man, virgin, he says that they should be put to death. And so that's what Ezekiel saw. Now, obviously, the Bible helps us to appreciate that the things written aforetime were written for our instruction. As we've done our Bible study, as we've completed the Revelation Climax book, it was highlighted to us this past week that the contents of the Revelation were primarily addressed to the anointed remnant. It depicted and explained to them what they were going to be doing, and it helps us to appreciate how Jehovah has used that group. Well, the same is true with this vision of Ezekiel chapter 9. It helps us to appreciate how Jehovah is using that man with the writer's inkhorn, the anointed class, to mark people for salvation during the impending Great Tribulation in Armageddon. In the case of the world that we're living in today, Jehovah has been using the anointed remnant for the past 90 years or so to preach the kingdom message, to help people to come to Jehovah's side. Indeed, the preaching work has been an important part of the activity that the anointed do. The April 1st, 2008 Watchtower had an interesting article about what we can learn from ancient cities. And in this particular article, there was a little discussion about a touchstone. And it really shed light on a statement that the Watchtower has made several times, that the kingdom message is the touchstone by which people will be judged during Armageddon. Now this article described a touchstone. They had a little picture of it, a little star-shaped object. And at the end of each little point of the star was a little round glob of metal. And what it was varying degrees of purity of gold or silver, whatever the metal that was being tested. And what they would do is they would take this little touchstone and they would pick one of those little stars and they would rub it against a rock. And they would see what kind of mark it made against the touchstone. Then they would reach in their pocket or their little purse, and they would take out a coin and they'd rub it next to it, and they would see if it made the same kind of mark. If it did, they were able to tell what quality of gold was in that particular coin, thus how much it should be worth by weight. And if the coin didn't match the mark that they had, they would just turn their little star over and they would do it again until they found the one they wanted. Then they were able to calculate the value of the coin. And the Watchtower says that the kingdom news is much like that. That as people come in contact with the good news, it makes an impression on them, doesn't it? Now, some individuals, as they're being preached to by the anointed and the great crowd companions, when we go to their door, they're like, I don't want nothing to do with that. That kingdom message hits them and bounces off. Doesn't even make a mark, does it? Now, other people, when they hear the kingdom message, they respond that this is something that they wanted to hear more about. And they start to respond to it. It's as if maybe it left an impression on them. As they continue to study, as they continue to make progress, they begin to bring their life into harmony with God's will, and it becomes more and more evident to those around them that are watching them, observing them, that they're making progress toward embracing the truth. Finally, they'll make a decision to dedicate their life to Jehovah and symbolize that by water baptism. And at that point, it is clearly evident that there is that mark. You see, the mark that the Watchtower talks about is the mark of Christian dedication to Jehovah as symbolized by water baptism. But you know, to observers, that mark is becoming evident even before the person makes that dedication and symbolizes it by water baptism. And that we're able to tell whether people will respond. You know, we had the part that Brother Jensen gave about overturning strongly entrenched things. Now, there are some individuals that when they come up against a strongly entrenched idea, that it's almost like they hit a stone wall. I mean, they've liked what they've heard up to this point, and they've embraced it, and now suddenly there's something that stops them. You see, but they don't get the mark then, do they? Because they don't allow themselves, their heart doesn't allow themselves to keep moving forward. Now, since we understand what the mark is helping people to approach or to reach the point of water baptism, the question is, what can we do to do more in this life-saving work? That was a question that was really foremost in the Apostle Paul's mind in ministry. If you turn with me to 2 Timothy, the 4th chapter, verse 5, notice what he said that his goal was, his purpose in life was. 2 Timothy, the 4th chapter, verse 5, he gives Timothy these advices. He tells Timothy, you, though, keep your senses in all things, suffer evil, do the work of an evangelizer, fully accomplish your ministry. You see, Timothy was urged not to just have a casual share in the ministry, not just to engage in the ministry just because he knew he had to, but he was encouraged to be involved heart and mind and soul so that he could do as much as he possibly could in the ministry. But you know, Timothy wasn't the only one that the Apostle Paul urged to do that. Turn back to the book of Colossians, the 4th chapter. And Paul gave one of our first century brothers some interesting admonition that we can benefit from ourselves. Colossians, the 4th chapter, and verse number 17. Paul says this, he says, tell Archippus, keep watching the ministry which you accepted in the Lord, that you fulfill. See, Paul felt the need to remind Archippus that he had accepted a ministry and that he should fulfill it. And so he was told to keep watching it. In other words, make sure that you fulfill it completely, that you don't leave any opportunity undone. Isn't that what those volunteer workers would do during a hurricane, is they would keep watching to make sure that they didn't inadvertently pass over a dwelling that didn't have a mark? Likewise, we're to keep watching our ministry so that we fulfill it. Well, you know, one of the things that we found that when an individual keep watching the ministry is that obviously we want to have a regular share in the ministry. We want to make sure that we're involved in the ministry to the point that our circumstances allow us. Or for one who had fully embraced the Christian ministry and was watching it, who was doing it fully, he would be determined that he was not going to become unfruitful or inactive or irregular about the ministry. And as we went over the congregation records, that was one of the things that we found that was really commendable for your congregation, is that in the past 6 months we've had 95% of our congregation that has maintained a regular share in the ministry. They have been able to preach the good news every month without stuttering, without stammering. We just keep doing it to the best of our ability. And so we want to commend our congregation for that fine report of 95% regular. There's other ways, though, that we could think about, are we keep watching the ministry? Stop to think back at the day that you were baptized. At our baptism, perhaps we think back to our special assembly day or our district convention. Two questions are asked the baptismal candidates. One of them has to do with, have you dedicated your life? Have you given your life to Jehovah? Have you made an unreserved dedication to Jehovah? And everyone who qualified for baptism answered yes. Well, occasionally it's good for us to stop and ask ourselves the question, have we kept that promise to Jehovah? Have we given Jehovah the best of what we have, or do we sometimes hold a little bit back? Or have we truly continued to have the same attitude and the same determination about the ministry that we had when we were baptized? Yes, our responsibilities and our circumstances of life has probably changed, and maybe we're not able to do as much as we did before, or maybe we can do more. The question is, though, are we living up to what we told Jehovah we would do? That we would fully accomplish our ministry, that we would keep watching it so that we wouldn't miss opportunities. Many in an effort to keep watching the ministry have found that, they can expand their ministry a little bit. Some of our brothers and sisters have found that they're able to make time in their schedule to auxiliary pioneer for 1 or more months. Much like 34 in our congregation here in Smiths did in the past 6 months, mostly in the month of March and some of them in April. We were able to expand our ministry and become auxiliary pioneers. Along with the 17 regular pioneers that we had, that means that 40% of our congregation was in full-time service in the month of March and April. And that's impressive, isn't it? As we think about what we were able to accomplish in the ministry. Did you enjoy it? Would you like to have that same type of joy, that same type of enriching experiences in your life on a regular basis? Well, could you keep watching the ministry? Could you fully accomplish your ministry by perhaps reaching out to be a regular auxiliary or a regular pioneer? Could you resemble Mark and his wife Paula? In the January 1st Watchtower of 2008, the article, They Enrich Their Life, Can You Do Likewise, tells us about Mark and Paula. They're a young married couple that both of them had successful careers. They were enjoying the fruit of their labors, and they were enjoying a comfortable life. But something made Mark and Paula realize that they could do more in the marking work if they just adjusted their circumstances a little bit. So they decided that perhaps that if they scaled back on their desires and their needs, that they could get by with less employment. So after some prayer and some planning, Mark and Paula reached the point where they decided that they were going to tell their employers that they were going to terminate their full-time employment so they could become full-time ministers. So Mark goes to his boss and he tells his boss what his determination is, and the employer is not really pleased with this. You can see a bird in the hand's worth two in the bush, right? One good worker, the boss realized, I don't want to lose Mark, and so he offered Mark a raise. Mark explained that the issue was not money. The issue was time. I want more time to devote to the precious ministry that I've accepted. Well, the boss didn't give up easy. He offered Mark not only a raise, but a promotion. Now, Mark said it was a tempting offer, but he stuck to his decision to pioneer. Now, while Mark's doing this, Paula goes to her employer. She worked at a hospital, and she has much the same situation. They offer her more money, and she says, no, it's not money. It's time. I need more time to devote to my ministry. Well, they didn't give up either. They offered her the job of executive secretary for the hospital, along with a handsome increase in salary. And she says, as tempting as the offer was, she stuck to her decision and both Mark and Paula began to regular pioneer. Now, Mark and Paula says that they were always happy serving Jehovah. But they said, that joy, it just began to multiply and just began to increase. It wasn't too long that Mark and Paula were invited to be special pioneers, and they serve up in some remote areas of Canada in small congregation. And they said, though it tested their faith and their determination, Jehovah has richly blessed them. Perhaps you've tasted the blessing and the happiness that comes from auxiliary pioneering, or perhaps regular pioneering. See, Mark and Paula enriched their lives. Could you perhaps do likewise? But Mark and Paula weren't the only ones. That same Watchtower magazine tells us another account about Kevin and Elena. They're newlyweds in the United States, and they said that like was common in the area where they lived, that most individuals who got married immediately went into the nest mode. They're like they're like birds. You ever seen how birds do that? That the courtship ritual, a part of it is maybe the male bringing materials for the female to make a nest out of. And then the minute the courtship is over, the nesting starts and the babies start. Well, that's what Kevin and Elaine experienced. They got married, they bought a house, now they started to fill the house with things, and they said it wasn't too long and they realized that their whole life was involved in their house and their things, and they had little time or energy or inclination left to serve Jehovah. That bothered Kevin and Elena. So they determined that they were going to make some changes, that they put their house up for sale, and when the house sold, they moved into smaller quarters where they could have less expenses. They began to regular pioneer. And being newlyweds, they thought that they were madly in love with one another. They said, something, we didn't know what love was all about. As they now spend their time together in the pioneer ministry, and they have common goals, not just common interests, they said that their love for one another grew as their love for Jehovah and their joy in the ministry grew. Now, we might be thinking that this is not a good time to try to sell a house to simplify our life because, the economy is just terrible. But, I've received a couple of phone calls from different states of publishers that we know that had a desire to simplify their life and to do more Jehovah's service. And you know something? One brother had his house on the market for about 3 months. He put it on right as the market crashed. He went to the district convention this summer and he came back and there was a contract on his house. Another brother put his house on the market. 15 days later, a man came to the house and said, I'll take it. Didn't even offer to dicker about the price. Just says, I'll take it. When can you be out? I want to move in July 1st. Now, both of them are able to simplify their life to some degree, and they're able to do more in the marketing. It's amazing what Jehovah can do when our heart desires to do more. But it may not be possible for us to simplify our life right now. But there are other things that many of our brothers and sisters have done that have enabled them to do more in the marketing work. We had at our special Assembly Day experiences of our publishers who went to serve where the need was greater this past summer or past years. Many families make that a goal, that that's what they want to do on a regular basis, perhaps every other year or every summer, takes part of their vacation and preach the good news in areas where they aren't preached on a regular basis, so they can increase their share in the marketing work. Have you ever thought about that? Can you imagine somebody wanting to take their vacation to go preach? Well, I think probably some of you did that when you pioneered, right? Because you saw the importance of the marketing work. But there may be other ways that we could expand our share in the marketing work. There's opportunities to serve in foreign language congregations. There was an experience that the 2005 yearbook tells us about. A sister in Great Britain she made the effort to learn Chinese. And she was out in the ministry one day and she stopped at a Chinese restaurant and she tried to witness to the owner of the Chinese restaurant. And when he realized what she was there for, that she was there to talk about Christianity and the Bible, it was like, I don't want that. Go away. As our sister was leaving the establishment, though, there was a voice from the kitchen that got her attention, and this older woman come running out of the kitchen, and she wanted to talk to our sister about the kingdom message. Arrangements were made for a study to be started, and this older woman, she got past her strongly entrenched problem of believing that there was a creator that made all things. But once she got beyond that, she started making rapid progress. But now stop to think, what would have happened if that sister went to that Chinese restaurant just to order egg foo young and an egg roll? What would have happened? Probably nothing. But because our sister was there to share the kingdom message in the Chinese language, this Chinese woman was attracted to the truth. See, had she just merely been ordering a snack or a meal? Nothing like that. But as a result of her putting forth the effort to learn a foreign language, this older woman was able to have the witness given to her. You know, many of our brothers have imitated the Apostle Paul at Acts chapter 16 and verse number 9. Acts chapter 16 in verse number 9. It says, during the night a vision appeared. A certain Macedonian man was standing and entreating him and saying, step over into Macedonia and help us. You know, if we listen very carefully, we would hear the same call being made in congregation territories where there's a need for people to speak a foreign language. You know, not too far from here, over in West Point, Georgia, they're building a great big automotive plant. And I imagine there's a lot of people in the Smith area, or perhaps Lynette and Valley, some of the territories are close by, Opelika, Auburn, that are thinking about getting a job to work at the Kia plant. And they're hoping for good wages and security, and they want to do something that's going to benefit their family. You know, in LaGrange, they're already taking the street signs and they're adding Korean labels to the street signs so that people who come from Korea can find their way around town. They're already opened up a Korean grocery store, and there's Korean restaurants popping up. You see, people in LaGrange have recognized the opportunity to capitalize on the influx of people so they can make a little bit of that money too. But do you think maybe some of us could capitalize on the influx of people and realize that it's an opportunity for us not to make money, but to increase our share in the marketing work? See, how are those folks from Korea going to hear the good news if they don't hear it in the language that touches their heart? You see, that's what the Watchtower says works the best. Could perhaps some of us try to learn a new language? You know, they tell us in the circuit that we're moving to that there's a Korean group. And they're working the Korean territory down in that area, and that my wife and I will be asked to give some encouragement to the Korean group. So if you hear me practicing Korean and I say "Annyeonghaseyo," it means hello, how are you? And if I say "Annyeonghaseyo," it means it's been nice to know you, goodbye. If I say "Kamsahamnida," it just means thank you. You see, but we can learn new languages so that we can reach out to encourage our brothers and help people in our territory. So could you perhaps keep watching your ministry, perhaps increase your share in the marketing work by serving as a regular pioneer or as an auxiliary pioneer 1 or more months, perhaps as a regular auxiliary pioneer? Could you perhaps move where the need is great to fill a need in a congregation that has a need for kingdom proclaimers? Or could you perhaps learn a new language? See, there's all sorts of ways for us to expand our ministry. Doors are being opened up to us, and you see, we want to be able to do like the Apostle Paul. At 1 Corinthians chapter 16 and verse number 9, he said that there was a large door of opportunity opened up to him. And he was determined that he was going to go through before the door went shut. He was going to make the best of his opportunities for the preaching work. Now, we have other opportunities, too, that we have to increase our share in the marketing work. Our special week of activity this week, we've shared with you our schedule already. So perhaps you can make arrangements to join us Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday as we go out in the ministry. Perhaps it's not your regular day to go out in the ministry, but maybe you can get some personal time away from work. Is the school back in Russell County, Lee County, is school back in already? Maybe your parents will give you an excused absence and you can go out in the ministry a little bit. Can you increase your share in the marking work, if not for on a regular basis, at least for this week? If you do, I'm sure that you will appreciate, like our brothers have, the 34 auxiliary pioneers, our 17 regular pioneers, that yes, indeed, Jehovah does enrich our lives. And it is indeed a privilege to do more in the marking work. But it's time for us to bring our meeting to a close this evening, so we invite you to stand if it's convenient for you. We're going to conclude by singing a song of praise to Jehovah, song number 211. And then as we conclude our meeting, we're going to ask if Brother Robert Leverett, if you'll close our meeting with prayer. Song number 211, we'll sing that together.